topic that's it's a topic that appears in Shas many times, and it's a very difficult topic to understand based on the context of the various gemaras that we're going to see. But at least we should be a little bit familiar with it, only because it does appear so many times in so many different contexts that it would be a shame not to explore it a little bit deeper. And it actually appears on Daf Yud Beis and Nazir. It appears, and it has actually nothing to do with Nazirus, so we have a little break from the laws of Nazir for a little bit, which would be a sign to a welcome sign for some of you who are a little bogged down with the technical details of Nazir. So let's pick up. It's the last line on Yud Aleph from the Beis on the bottom. Amar Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef Amar Rav Yochanan. Says Rav Yochanan, Ha'omer l'shlocho tzei v'kadesh li'isha stam. Okay, so here you have a case where a person sends out his messenger, and we know that aside from proposing to a woman and being makadesh her, you could assign an agent. We know that in all of Torah matters, a person could assign an agent to do almost everything that he could do himself, right? Aside from things that pertain to his body, like shaking a lulav, putting on tefillin, perhaps a bris, also cannot be done with anyone except for that person. But usually we have an agent, a shliach that could take care of the mishaleach's matters. So here he's very unspecific. He says, it's time to get married. You, my agent, go out and find me a woman and be makadesh her to me. Now the rule is, as soon as he finds someone and he does an act of kiddushin, he gives her money, he gives her a ring, right? He gives her a star. Then we say that they are engaged, okay? Mikudeshes. The problem is, and the Bach puts in the missing words on top, that the Gemara in Gittin does include, which is a separate discussion why over here it doesn't say that the shliach died, but the end of the story is that the shliach died. Now, we don't know anything about his shlichus. Did he find a girl? Was it mikudeshes? Is Ruvain, now this person who sent out the agent, is he, like, what's his story? So the Gemara says, Asher b'chol hanashim sheba olam, chazaka shliach osa shlichuso. So we say, well, a good chance that the shliach was successful in finding a girl, and therefore we don't know who this girl is. So now the shliach doesn't come back. So the guy says, okay, I'm in trouble. If I start to date in, let's say, 3-4 months from now, any girl that I meet has a outside chance of being related to this phantom girl who my shliach was makadesh me to. But I don't know who this girl is because my shliach died and never told me any relevant information on her. So it could be that any living female in this country, again, presumably he didn't go overseas, so it limits the pool a little bit. But if you're in a country like Europe, right, you can't basically marry anyone in that country because maybe that woman who you want to marry to was the sister or the mother or the daughter or the aunt or some kind of relation to this woman who could have been mekudesh to this agent. Okay, that's called chazaka shliach osa shlichuso. And the Gemara on the third line says, Bekiva on the low parish lay, right? And since the shliach never sent back any information,
there's Batal Bashishim. You also have like 1 in 1 billion. So
right?
It doesn't sound like far-fetched.
So yes, it does, but that's what makes this interesting. If it weren't far-fetched, then we wouldn't be talking about it. Okay, we have an audience that you're disrupting. Okay, the kivan de lo parish lay, and since no information was sent back to Ruvain back at home, right? Halo yada hey nihu kaddish lay. He has no idea which one the shliach met up with. Again, the grand assumption is that the shliach did what he was supposed to do. Okay, without getting into the details in Tosfos says, I got a bigger problem. How could anybody ever get married? Because maybe maybe this woman, we don't know, could marry someone else, and that someone else is usher to the other woman, right? So this is like a possible never-ending thing.
Marrying the woman who was married.
Exactly. So this Tosfos here and the Tosfos in Gittin actually addresses this, and they conclude that this is not really a problem midoraisa. The problem is midrabanan. We kind of punish this man named Ruvain for sending out a shliach to do something that has a potential disaster written all over it. So that's not really this topic. That's just a side note that Tosfos says that we're not going to go crazy. This is more of a derabanan takana to avoid people who just send out messengers without giving them the instructions. Like, I like blondes who live on the West Coast, who are between 25 and 29, who make between $150,000 and $160,000 a year. If he starts making that list very, very minimal, then that limits the potential dating pool out there. But if he just says general, right, any person who happens to be a female and who's Jewish, presumably, then we kind of give him a slap on the wrist. Okay, next. I'm partial to the West Coast. Okay, stop joking. Esvei Reish Lakish Rav Yochanan. Now, Reish Lakish doesn't like this because he's going to bring a Mishnah from a law of Karbanos. If you have a nest, okay, a woman has to bring 2 Torim or 2 Bnei Yonah, right? She has to bring a Chatas and an Asham. Let's say she's a Zava, she's a Yoledes, she just gave birth. She's a Zava, she's almost a Nida, okay? So she has to bring a Karban. Now, she bought birds. The problem is one of the birds flew the coop, okay? And now it's flying around, and there's some Kedusha to that bird because it was bought as a Karban. Or the Mishnah says, it got mixed up with other birds that have to die, okay, because they were listed as inactive for a Karban because the owner, let's say for example, was machaper by another bird and doesn't need this bird, so you can't just get rid of a chatas bird; you have to keep it. So it got mixed up. Oh, shemes echad mehen, or if one of the birds that this woman died in a cage just died. Okay, so the Mishnah says, this is a Mishnah from Maseches Kinim, Yikach zug l'sheni. You purchase another bird, and that's it. Okay, the iluken mefureshes ein lo takana. Okay, this line is actually taken out by Tosfos, so we're not going to learn it. It's a bit confusing, but here's the punchline: the ilu sha'ar kinin ba'alma misaknin. But hold on a second. Forget about the fact that this woman over here has her problem about what do I do to buy my next bird to make up for the bird that either flew the coop or died. What about the fact that this bird is now a free bird and going throughout down the block, across county lines to other people's homes? How do you know that bird's not going to get mixed up with some other bird? Okay? And the Gemara says, every cage in that country should have the same problem, similar to every girl, right? You see where this is going? To every girl should be usher to Ruvain, because how do you know that this girl that she's dating now isn't the sister of the girl who met up with the shliach? So too, how come every bird, right, in every coop, right, is now a theoretical problem, right? So the Gemara compares birds and women. Okay, I'll leave the editorial alone. So the Gemara says, I'm going to answer you what the distinction is. Amar Leisu, Rav Yochanan says to his brother-in-law Reish Lakish, don't ask me a question. Ka'amina ana isha delo naida. I'm talking about a woman that is stationary. She doesn't travel. She's not right. She's not movable. The amridli at istura denied, and you're telling me, you're asking me a question from a bird that goes from one place to another place to another place to another place that has no home base. Let's look at Rashi, or the Mefurish. Oh God, the last skinny line before the wide lines on the right side. Rashi the Mefurish says, let's think about what's the distinction between a woman who doesn't travel and a bird that does travel. So first we have to understand, what does that mean, travel? So Rashi quotes the pasuk from Mishlei, "Dekol kvodo bas melech penima." Okay, I'm just going to say it, so I'm just the shliach over here. The proper way for a woman is to be home, right, and not out in the world. Okay, therefore, she is what we call kavua. She's set. She's stationary. And as Rashi says, "V'hoel de kavia," and because she is stationary, she's not on the move, as opposed to a bird. Havile kamerza al merza. We view her as 50-50. I'll explain that in a second, what this means, 50-50. The usher. And therefore, because she is 50-50, meaning we don't have a majority to say what Shmuel said 10 minutes ago, hey, the chances are one, it's like Powerball, 1 in 292 million, that this woman who you're dating happens to be the sister of the girl who the shliach made up with and then died. Okay, you have 1 in a 292 million chance. So therefore, that's what I would call pretty good odds of not having a potential problem. So therefore, you have nothing to worry about. So Rashi says, no. You don't have 1 in 292 million. You have 1 in 2. You are no better than a coin toss. Okay, we'll discuss that because that's what the topic tonight is about. Va'at most v'slimi surah denying. I'm continuing in Rashi on the second wide line on the right. And you're asking me a question from a bird that's a korban, right? There, the difference by the bird is, you know what I'm going to say? What are you going to tell me? That every single coop, every single cage, you're going to tell me has a possibility that one of those birds came from this lady who had to bring a korban? That is virtually unimaginable. It's statistically impossible. Why? De kol de parish meruba de hetere parish. And that's also the key word for this class, is anything that becomes separated, we say, well, where did it come from? Is the home base, chances are that it is, or chances are that it isn't? So because there are millions of birds in the world, the chance that you open your cage and you're looking at a bird that came from 25 miles away is statistically impossible. So therefore, chances are that your bird is not the other bird that came, and therefore you're okay. Okay, so I want to stop there because we have been introduced to this concept of Rashi called kawua, which we're going to call 50-50. Okay, in mathematical terms, when you learn probability, it's called 0.5, right? You're a coin toss, right? Anything with 100% certainty, I think, is correlated with the number 1, and anything with a 50% is called, in math terms, 0.5. So where does this concept come from? So in order to understand the source of this whole distinction between something that is 50-50 and something that is not 50-50, i.e. we go by the majority, we have to look at the Gemara in Ksuvas. Okay, we learned in Daf Yomi, this was in the middle of July. It was in the middle of July. We started Ksuvas in the beginning of July. So right in the middle of July, the third week or so, if you remember from, if you were away and you didn't do the daf, so we'll do a little bit of it now. Okay, the topic is, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but the topic is a woman who claims that she was raped or was mizaneh, and we're not exactly sure who the person was. And now the question is, well, how do we deal with this baby? Could he marry a Kohen? Could he not marry a Kohen? We have all kinds of lineage problems, right? So the Gemara goes on a very long tangent. And if you have a Ksuvas at home, I'm on page 15, 15a, right by the word gufa. Okay, the word gufa is about 9/16 of the way down. Second word on the line. Gufa amar abzera. Kol kavua kamerza al merza dami. Okay, the Gemara over here talks about this woman, how we view women, kind of like what the Gemara in Nazir said, right? How do we, if there's a suffix and we don't know how to paskin, right? So how do we view a case of a woman? Do we go after a majority, or do we say throw the majority out the window and go by the old coin toss? You know better than a 50-50. And if you know better than a 50-50, then we have to go l'chumrah. So the Gemara says that we can actually go l'kula when it comes to 50-50. Just because something is 50-50 and we don't follow the rove doesn't mean that that's a chumrah. That's a stringency. We could actually show that that's a kula. It's a leniency. So the Gemara says, how do you know? Minole, how do we know that we apply it to a stringency and a leniency? Right? This is the rule of Rav Zera. Right? Rav Zera was famous for three things. One is Kol Haroy Labila. Second is Benos Yisrael in Nida Samach Beis. And the third thing is Kol Kavua Kamertzal Mechta. So whenever you hear of Rav Zera, right, this is his big three, right? So the Gemara says, so let's learn this concept that we throw the rove out the window. Now, rove is very important in Judaism. We kill people based on rove. If you have a court, 20 of 71, and it's 40 to 21, 40 to 31, majority rules. It's not just, we follow the rove when it comes to when it comes to chicken soup. Something falls in chicken soup, right? When we have problems with Isser, right? Kashrus. We also follow it by Dine Nefashos. We don't follow it by Dine Mominos, though. By monetary laws, we actually don't follow the rove. That's a whole topic within itself. When we get to Bava Kama and Bava Bas, we will have a class on it. Why exactly we don't follow the rove? But we'll see later on. But anyways, so here we have a case of Isser V'Hekter. We have a case of we have a piece of meat. Now, today, if we find meat, we don't do anything. We throw it out in the garbage, right? So then the question was, well, what if I find meat? The Gemara says, there are 9 stores, Kulan Mochos Basar Shkuta. They all sell what we call kosher meat, 9 of them, the Achaz Basar Nevela. So you live in a Haimisha community, 90% of the stores are kosher, 10% aren't kosher. So if you find a piece of meat, now the question is, how did you obtain this piece of meat? And this is what the whole point of this whole shir tonight is about. V'lakach, and you purchased one. Achas mehen, ve'ena yodea me'eze mehen lakach, and you're not sure which store it came from. Sveko aser. So the Gemara in Ksuva says, you can't eat it. Even though if you ask a statistician, he'll tell you, well, I have 9 plus 1, I have 10 stores. You have a 0.9, right, in math, right? You have a 90% chance that this is kosher. We take the rule of rove and we throw it out the window. Can't eat it. You're no greater than a 50-50. Ubenimtza, what if you found it on the floor? You didn't go and buy it. You actually found it on the floor. Halach achar harov. Then you go after the majority. We'll see why. So the Gemara says, Hasam mechumra. No, that's not a leniency there. It's a stringency. It's a chumra because what are you doing to the meat? You're throwing it out because it's a 1 in 2 chance. 1 in 2 chance, 50-50. I can't take a chance. If it's 90-10, okay, I'll put my money down on 90, right? I'll put my money down on the favorite, right? That's a no-brainer. But if it's even odds, not even odds, but if the odds are even, then you're 50-50, then it's a coin toss, right? It's like the bet in the Super Bowl, right? The first bet when they have these, right, these teaser bets are, what's the coin toss, right? So it's interesting that tails is actually minus 120. I don't know if you're for the bettors out there, but historically in Super Bowls, tails have showed up about 2/3 of the time. So now we all know that it's really 50-50.
Is it the exact same weight?
It's the exact same weight, but you know the law of large numbers. No, you don't know. So basically the law of large numbers basically says that you could flip a coin 1,000 times, and it's not such a surprise that 900 of the 100, that 900 of the 1,000, you'll have heads and 100 tails. So you're going to say, that's not fair. Like something's wrong with the law of probability. But the law of large numbers tells you that you don't do it 1,000 times, do it 100 million times. When you do it 100 million times on a simulated computer program, you'll actually find out that it's 50 million heads and 50 million tails because the graph goes more 50-50 the more times you do it. Even if you try now, you do it 10 times, you could get 8 out of 10. It's not unheard of, but do it 10 billion times. Then you'll actually be more distributed. Anyway, we're not here to talk about the Super Bowl. We're here to talk about the 9 stores. So back to the Gemara. So the Gemara says, so I don't have a proof that it goes l'kula because this case is talking about l'chumra. You have to throw the meat out. How about this case? You have 10 shrotzim. 9 of them are frogs, and one of them, now there's nothing wrong with the dead frog. Dead frog is not one of the big 8. We know Shmona shrotzim, they are metameyu, but the tzfardeya, which most people think it is a frog, it's not 100% sure, right? We know it from the makos, but whatever, it's not so clear. The bottom line is it's not tameh, it's not impure, the tzfardeya. The weasel is a problem. So if you have 10 of them, 9 of them are okay. One of them is a problem, and you touched one, and the Gemara says, and I don't know which one it is, sveikotame. So what do? So you're going to say, well, there's a 90% chance that I'm safe. The Gemara says, no, you're not safe. It's no better than a 50-50. You're tameh. So the Gemara says, that's not a proof because you go stringency also. You're tameh, you're impure. Hasam nami l'chumra. So we say, let's do the opposite. You have 9 shrotzim, v'tzfardeya echad b'neihem. Now it's the other way. 9 of them are tameh. One of them, the frog, is tahor, and you touched one of them, and you don't know which one you touched. So the Gemara in Ksuva says, "B'rishus hayachid sveiko tameh." If you happen to be locked up in a house, and it's a rishus hayachid, we say that's it. We go l'chumra. But b'rishus harabim sveiko tahor. But if it happens to be in rishus harabim, without getting into that, which we learned from a sota, because the sota is rishus hayachid, but rishus harabim she's okay. So therefore, we learn from the sota that rishus harabim it's all cool. If you have a doubt, we give you the benefit of the doubt. So that's fine. So there's our answer. There's our answer that we apply this rule of when in doubt, right? We go lakula, we go lenient, and we say that you are not ritually impure. You're not tameh. So that answers the question of how we know that we apply this rule when it comes to a kula. So that's one thing the Gemara wants to know. And a second thing, which is also very important to understand the basis of this whole concept, which we still don't know why it makes sense. Why do we care if I find a piece of meat? It's okay, but if I went to a store and I bought it and I blacked out and I forgot where I bought it from, it's a problem. What in the world is the difference between the two? So we still don't know why that's true. Is it logic, or is there some kind of pasuk in the Torah that tells us? So the Gemara says it's actually a pasuk. It's a very complicated pasuk, though. What we call it exeris hakasuk. Exeris hakasuk means we can't explain it, but the Torah says it, so we have to live with it. But the problem is the Torah says it in like one of these ways. It doesn't say it directly. We have to make an ukimta, and we have to bend over backward to figure out what the pasuk means. So what's the pasuk talking about? The pasuk says, Amar Krava Arav Lo V'Kam Alav. This is the pasuk in Shoftim, in the parsha of Ari Mikra, about killing someone by accident. Killing someone by accident, there's 6 cities of refuge that the murderer has to go, and as long as he's there, the Goel Hadam, the relative of the deceased, is not allowed to touch you. Right? It's like in Capture the Flag, right? That middle no man's land, right? Is fine, right? No one can touch you. Once you leave, it's a problem. Then you're a marked man or woman. So what about the Gemara? So the Torah says, what if I plan ahead and I kill someone and it's deliberate? So there's no Ari Miklat. And this guy decides to go to an Ari Miklat, a city of refuge. Sorry, it's not going to help you. The Goel Hadam could go and hunt you down. This is only if you kill someone by accident and throw you a bone, right? Move out and you'll be safe. So the pasuk says that if you plan and you murder someone. So the Gemara says, Ad she yiskavin lo. So the Gemara is bringing, and this is a little complicated because the Gemara is bringing a proof but just follow me for a second. The pasuk says that I have to plan to kill him, meaning that the Torah says you're only liable if you have intent to kill someone. What if I have intent to kill someone and I accidentally shoot the wrong person? So in America today, they call that either murder two, they call it manslaughter. Right? It happens with gangs, right? An innocent bystander is shot, right? And so it's not intent. You hit someone by accident, so it's either murder two, it's manslaughter, it's some. So the Gemara says actually that it's not so simple. There's a machlokes, right, between Rav Shimon and the Chachamim in Sanhedrin, and Rav Shimon actually says that you are exempt. The Chachamim say, no way, you're not exempt, because at the end of the day, you killed someone. That's one discussion. So the Gemara over here, in trying to establish this proof, again, we're like digging over here. We got to take this layer by layer, right? So the Gemara over here, in order to establish the proof, says, look at the pasuk. The Rabbanon, and the Rabbanon learn from that pasuk, not kavana, what it has to do with Amrei Debeyanai Prat Lazorik Avin Lagav. You know what the Torah excludes? The Torah includes someone who kills someone by accident. But what if you kill someone, you throw a rock from a distance into a crowd of people, and someone dies? Then the Torah says you're exempt. Not if you shoot someone by accident and it goes to someone else. If there's a crowd of people and you throw a rock, now you're throwing a rock because you want to kill at least one person. Problem is you have no idea if the people in that group are Jews. So you're going to say, who cares whether they're Jews or not? Well, we care a lot, because whether you like it or not, according to Torah law, you're only culpable for murder if the person who you kill is Jewish. If he's not Jewish, then you're not chayiv, you're not culpable. So the Gemara says, hey chidami, what is this group of people? What's going on? Are you telling me that what? That there are 9 non-Jews and 1 Jew. So let's get to that 90-10 ratio, right? So let's, for argument's sake, say that there is 90% Canaanim and 10% Jews. So that's why the Torah says that you're not liable? That's not why you're not liable. You're not liable because you have a ratio in your favor. There's only a 10% chance that this person is Jewish. So what do you have to worry about? Chances are you'll walk, right? You're innocent. So it says the Gemara, "V'tepukle deruba Kanaaninu." I'm reading from the Gemara. Forget it. I don't need a pasuk to tell me that. I know that because you have the probability on your side that they're not Jewish. Or inami palga. And if you're going to say that at worst case it's 50-50, still safek nefashos lahakel. When it comes to the death penalty, we're very, very lenient. And you have to be beyond a shadow. It has to be 51%. Here, it's 50-50. So the Gemara says, and this is the punchline. It takes a long, long time to get to the punchline, but that's how it works here. Lo tzricha di'ika tisha Yisraelim. There are 9 Jews. Ukanani yechad beinehem. So there's 9 Jews and there's 1 non-Jew, right? So dahavile kanani kavua. Do you know why we don't now? So you're going to say, hold on, 9 to 1 Jews? You're in trouble. There's a 90% chance that you're chayiv misa. That's pretty good odds. Problem is that 10% or that 1% saves your hide, because what happens now? This is kawua. What does kavua mean? They are stationary in one place. And just like the meat, that the stores are stationary, remember the meat from a half hour ago? That meat wasn't found. That meat came from a store, and the store is stationary. So just like here, these people are stationary. So you're going to say that it's 90% chance that it's a Jew? We say, it's a case of kavua. B'chol kavua k'mechza mechza dami. And it becomes a case where everyone is stationary, and therefore the pasuk says, I need this pasuk to teach me that when I have this scenario that the Chachamim took from this pasuk, I'm excluded from the death penalty. Because even though you think that it's a 90% chance, we don't say percentages. We take this concept of majority, we throw it out the window, and we go by a coin toss. you're 50-50. So what do you do when you're 50-50? You don't convict because you don't have a majority on your side. Beautiful. That's the end of the Gemara in Ksubas. Okay. It's okay. I was going to get into that, but I want to save that for the end if we have time, which we definitely won't. So we'll have to talk about it some other time. So I want to explain. So now that we have some kind of idea what the Gemara calls fixed and what the Gemara calls majority, right? So the word is kawua. Kavua means the stores are stationary. The people in the crowd that you throw the rock in are stationary. We don't apply the rule of rov majority. Majority does not win. It's no greater than a 50-50. Then we have this concept which is called the parish, meruba parish. Meaning, I'll give you an example, okay? We're all familiar with getting back to Mega Millions, right? How do? They have a big bubble and they have these balls, right? You ever see the lottery drawing? It's really cool. It's like balls running around, right? So there's 60 numbers, I think, in Powerball. So you have a chance of picking number 35, random number, right? 1 in 60. Assuming you have 60 balls and they're all numbered, so you have a 1 in 60 chance of picking your number, right? Like roulette. The first time, right? Without getting into crazy combinations, right? You pick a number, great. So each ball, you have 1/60th, 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 fine. You remember the NBA lottery? How it used to work? The worst team, the Knicks usually, they had the most ping pong balls. So the worst team has 12 ping pong balls with a Knick logo. The second to worst team has 11 ping pong balls, the Nets. The third team, the Warriors, back in the 90s before they got good, they were the third to worst team. So they had 10. Meaning, if you were to tell me who has the best chance of selecting the number one pick, it goes to the Knicks because they're the worst team. And the more ping pong balls you have, the better chance you have. So that's what the definition of kol de parish, meruba parish means. Chances are that if you were betting, if you had a gun to your head and said, who's going to get the number one pick? You have to go with the Knicks, the worst team, because they have the most ping pong balls, right? You don't need a scientist to figure that out. That's what kol de parish, meruba parish means. But what does kavua mean? So I saw an article sent to me a few years ago where someone tries to explain the difference between the meats. So let's put on our thinking caps for a second. The meat, I bought it and I forgot where I bought it from. So what do? We penalize you and say that meat isn't kosher. You can't eat it. You have a 90% chance, right? The MIT student is telling you, you have a 90% chance that it's kosher. We throw that percentage out the window and say the Torah in Parsha Shoftim teaches us this novel concept of kavua, and because the stores are stationary, throw the percentage out the window. Why? But what if you find it? If you find it, you didn't technically do anything wrong. House money. You're walking.
It's a knas.
You see the meat. Look at that. Lunch for my animal. Well, no, lunch for me.
It's a knas.
Right. So let's think about it in terms of two concepts. One concept is called a moral hazard, okay, which I heard a long time ago. There was a guest speaker in my shul. I said, wow, that makes so much sense. So we'll talk about that in a second. The other one is from an article that I got from Rabbi Hertzfeld about 5 years ago. And I'm just going to read a little bit from it. And here's what he posits. He says, getting back to my ping pong balls, right, with a lottery. So let's say there's 90% chance that you have a red ball. Halacha recognizes that based on Achar Rabim Lahatos, that if you have a case of 9 kosher stores and 1 non-kosher store, so this randomly piece of meat, right, is kosher. However, here's the problem with kavua. Once the question involves people's perception, recall, or intent, the simple statistical heuristic fails. Here's an example. If my son is running around with 9 other children and I throw a football randomly to the children, I might be more likely, subconsciously, able to throw toward my son, right? Or if I'm upset with him, perhaps I might throw the ball away from him. The likelihood that any given child will catch the football, therefore, is not necessarily 10%. Even though they're,
Can I say that?
yeah,
Is it
sure.
the same thing with the butcher's shop? What are the chances that he's going to go into a non-kosher butcher?
Hold that thought. My son's likelihood could be significantly higher or lower, and correspondingly, other children's could be significantly lower or higher. Likewise, if my son is hanging out with 9 other children, and my son always says something rude, I might convince myself that it is unclear who said it. A phenomenon known as selective perception. Us fathers out there know a little thing or two about selective perception. Or I might later selectively forget that my son was the one who made the rude comments. We call that recall bias, right? It's a member of our family, so we bend the rules a little bit. In a town with 9 kosher stores and 1 non-kosher store, if the person cannot recall which store he went to, then there is no reason to assume that there's a 90% chance that he went to the kosher store. The probabilities are affected by what causes him, consciously or subconsciously, to go to one store over another, or to remember or to forget which store he went to. Perhaps he's more likely to forget that he went to the non-kosher store because that will allow him to eat the meat. So there's something going on behind the scenes, bekitzer, that we're not privy to. So it's almost like the word knas, we're going to penalize you because we're not dealing with a clean mathematical statistics over here. It's not just 90-10. There's something going on that kind of skews the equation over here.
But the problem with that.
It's not random.
The problem with that is.
That doesn't mean that it fits into every gemara.
No, the problem with that is, let's say you're parachuted into one of the stores and then taken out of that store. So you have no.
Okay, we're gonna. Okay.
So then on that basis.
Right. Now.
The halacha is still the same, but his argument.
Right. I don't know if anybody is in the insurance business, but if you are in the insurance business out there on Zoom, you would know this concept called a moral hazard. A moral hazard occurs when one party in a transaction has the opportunity to assume additional risks that negatively affect the other party. The decision is based not on what is considered right, but on what provides the highest level of benefit. Hence the reference to morality. This can apply to activities within the financial industry, between a borrower and a lender, and for example, the insurance industry. For example, when a property owner obtains insurance on a property, the contract is based on the idea that the property owner will avoid situations that may damage the property. I want to make sure that my house is kept at night, so therefore I have insurance, but that doesn't mean I don't turn my burglar alarm on. I still would, right? Maybe. The moral hazard exists that the property owner, because of the availability of the insurance, may be less inclined to protect the property since the payment from an insurance company lessens the burden on the property owner in case of a disaster. I'm not going to sweat it if my house burns down, right? We know all kinds of insurance scams. People don't mind or may prefer sometimes their house burning down to collect insurance money. Is there someone on this call that I should be aware of? Okay, so that's what we call moral hazard. Prior to the financial crisis of 2008, when the housing bubble burst, certain actions on the parts of lenders could qualify as moral hazard. For example, a mortgage broker working for an originating lender may have been encouraged through the use of incentives such as commissions to originate many loans as possible, right? So we see where this is going. So what does that have to do with anything? What's the moral hazard over here? This person thinks he could get away with, you know what, I wasn't sure where I went to. It doesn't really matter. After all, I have this thing called Rove in my back pocket. And if I'm not sure about this meat, halacha dictates, abracadabra, your meat is kosher. Maybe there's a chance that it came from a non-kosher butcher. No, I have this special power to tell me that this meat is kosher because of statistics. We say, no. You weren't careful. This was a moral hazard. You relied on something, right? You took out insurance because you didn't really have to watch your house that much. You didn't have to be so careful to make sure that you went to the right butcher. So I see some grins in the crowd, but I personally think it's somewhat.
You say that also the guy who found it. You didn't do enough research.
Right. Okay. 100%. There are a discussion. Listen, this is what makes a good debate. So I'm laying it out. I happen to personally like that reason. Now, of course, there's Xeris HaKosov. Problem is, if I were to tell you that we learned it from a pasuk in Shoftim about throwing a rock into a crowd, you're going to say, what does that have to do with the price of cheese in China? And you're right. You have to really, really stretch to, and this concept has perplexed many commentators throughout time and memoriam, and there really is no other way to describe it other than these two methods. In fact, the Ran, if you learn Chulin, this appears obviously in Chulin, the Ran says he says, don't waste your time thinking about it. It's Xeris HaKosov, and its proof is something to the effect of what Shmuel says. He has a question. He says, what if you bought the meat from a kosher store, and in the end you found out that day there was a non-kosher piece of meat in that store? So what are you going to tell me? Logic says it's kavua. It's no greater than a 50-50 because the stores are stationary. No, it's good. You could eat it. What about kavua? The answer is because it's not a case that the Torah sets up about buying something and then forgetting. It's a case of, it's not that you forgot. It's just that the butcher says, I got bad news for you. There's a 1 in 10 chance that the meat that you bought in my store, although I'm kosher, someone by accident bought a non-kosher meat. It got mixed up. It's about a 9-to-1 ratio, like our Gemara. So therefore you could say, oh my God, it's a problem. The Ran says it's not a problem. Therefore, the only conclusion the Ran says, this is not me, this is the Ran in Chulin, right? Says the only conclusion is, it must be Xeris HaKosov, something that the Torah mandates, and we don't necessarily understand. Okay? Now, let's apply this concept. What time is it? 8:42. We're good? We're good. Let's apply this concept to a Gemara in Psachim. Okay? We have a famous Gemara in Psachim on 9b, about 16 lines from the bottom. If you have a Psachim at home, you could look in. It's Tes Amud Beis. It's a case of the mouse. Okay, if you ever learn the beginning of Psachim, you know that we like to talk about mice who do various sinister stuff with chametz and bring it into houses and cause all kinds of tumult, right? So over here, the Gemara says,
Can you argue, it's not just that this is Xeris HaKosov, all the principles of
Rove is Xeris HaKosov
Yeah,
also,
all the
but it makes sense, meaning, statistics should make sense, right? If more people want to convict than not convict, so, go after the majority. Majority rules. So it's an ancient concept.
Some of the principles of majority make sense, but not all.
Correct. In fact, majority, not to get into it, but there's a discussion, how strong majority, if I have a rove and if I have a chazaka, the Gemara in Kiddushin, Samech Gimel, I think, says that rove actually beats chazaka. When there's a conflict, when rove tells you to make a right and chazaka tells you to make a left, even though we know how strong chazaka is, no pun intended, where chazaka actually means strength, rove actually in a collision with chazaka trumps chazaka. That's how strong rove is, right? So I hear what you're saying, but there's more to do. So let's get back to the mouse. Rove is majority. Ruba. Okay. Teisha tziburin shel matzah ve'echad shel chametz. I have a stack, okay? 9 stacks of it are matzah boxes, and 1 box is a chametz box. Va'asa achbar b'shakil. The mouse came. The mouse really didn't care. He was just hungry, or she came, and she was hungry. And what happened? It went into a house that was cleaned already for Pesach, right? We know that we like to clean homes before Pesach so that there's no problem. So now this mouse came and deposited this piece of item. We don't know. I mean, chances are that it was matzah, but we don't know what it is because there's a 10% chance it was chametz. And he brought it into a house. Now we can't ask the mouse because the mouse doesn't know which box he took it from. So therefore, the Gemara says, what do we do? Now, here's the question. What is the question? What does the Gemara want to know? So it's interesting that Rashi says, we have a problem now with this house. Meaning what? This house was cleaned. It was stamped clean by the cleaning company, no problem. So now the guy says, oh my God, I have a piece of bread. It's somewhere in this house. Do I gotta clean this whole house again? Just because a mouse brought something into this house.
That's why you say the bottle the shish.
So he says, why? Hold on a second. There's only a 10% chance that it's a problem. Here we go again with 90 and 10. So that's the way Rashi learns the Gemara. Ready for this? Tosfos says, no. You know what we're worried about? If someone finds this, can I eat it? Is it kosher? Now, who would eat something that a mouse is a different question. Just like who would pick up meat that we found in the store and eat it is a different question. But that was, 1,500 years ago. Today we live in a little bit modern times where we're not going to worry about these kind of things. But Tosfos over here says, the Re in Tosfos says, I'm worried about, can I eat it on Pesach? Right? Is it, I found it, and I know the mouse deposited it because I cleaned the heck out of this house. So now the question is, there's a 90% chance it's kosher. So what do we got to do? We got to put on our butcher shop hat and say, so the Gemara says, I know how to answer that question. It goes back to the discussion of the butcher shops in Ksubas, right? Good. That's a case of what? Kavua. What was kavua? The stacks were stationary. Comes in the mouse, chaps around, takes the piece out, and now, like the man or woman came and...
Is your phone dead?
No, I got 10%. I'll make it. Came and took it, right? And now we don't know. How about Pirish Ba'asa, Achbar? What if a piece of one of those boxes was detached? So the mouse didn't take it from something that was stationary, it had legs. So now this piece detached itself from the boxes of chametz and or matzah, and now the mouse comes, takes it, and says, I'm going to bring it into the house. That is a case of called the parish. Then we rely on the majority. So we say we're going to take this principle and we're going to apply it to a new case. Great. How about the following? Oh, you're going to plug me in?
Yeah, try, but it doesn't really work this hour. We went cheap on the electric.
You went cheap on the electric. Okay. Shkayach. So that's what the Gemara says. Okay, so what do we see from here? We see that we take this concept and we're going to apply it all throughout halacha. Things that you could never imagine in a million years, we're going to apply it to. Now, there's another case in Masechah Shabbos that I'm going to bring it. I'm going to use the words of the Shulchan Aruch. This is a case called Mona Shisha. Okay, I'm going to read it from the Shulchan Aruch. If you're following, it's in Orach Chaim, Siman 331. Okay, Orach Chaim, 344 in the Shulchan Aruch.
You have an Android?
No. Oh. Yeah. Almost. Second. Sorry for that. Okay, so says the Shulchan Aruch, Haholach b'midbar. We've learned this case. We've learned this case, Masechah Shabbos, Daf Samach Tes. The Gemara, the Shulchan Aruch brings this as a halacha. Like you're going to think, oh my God, what are the chances of you not knowing when Shabbos is? Well, we'll learn about it anyway. Haholach b'midbar ve'eno yodea matai hu Shabbos. You're lost in the desert, right?
Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Lost in space, right? You know what I mean? Lost in space. You're lost in the desert. You're lost somewhere, and you have no idea what day it is. Okay, you land and you have no idea what day it is. Now you have other problems, obviously. Shabbos is probably the last thing on your mind, but as Jews, all joking aside, we have to respect Shabbos. So, right? So Mona Shiva Yamim Miyom Shenasan El Libo. So what do? You count 7 days, starting from the day you realized you had no idea what day it was. Okay, kind of like what God did. 1, 2, 3, 7th day, Shabbos. Okay. And you take it seriously that you actually make kiddush, you make havdalah, you actually pretend that you're back home in New York as an ordinary Shabbos. The question is, if you have, what if you need to do malacha? I mean, you need to cut, you need to do things to survive. So now you're in survival mode, right? So if you have what to eat, then you're forbidden from doing any work, right? Until you have really nothing left to do and you're going to die. So that you can't do. So you have to use up all your resources, and then you do the minimum amount you need to survive, right? Like that reality TV show, right? Even, right? Even on the day that you sanctify a Shabbos, you do the minimum. You do the really, really minimum possible just to survive until the plane comes and rescues you. It's called playing it safe. Very good. And the Shulchan Aruch ends off by saying, and it's permitted to walk. You know, they have a problem of walking, right? You don't let it walk a certain amount, whatever it is. So you're permitted to walk every day, even on your day, on your bizarro Shabbos day. So it's interesting. The Magen Avraham has a quick comment. He says, hold on a second. You're not allowed to do malacha, only what you need to live, the absolute bare minimum. He says, hold on a second. Let's play with numbers. Every day is a 1 in 7 chance, or we'll call 13.5%, whatever the number is. It's only a 13.5% chance that today is Shabbos. So why don't I say I have Rove? What do you mean? There's a 83% chance that today is a weekday. Why am I going crazy and assuming that it's Shabbos and fear the worst and do the absolute minimum to survive? There's an 83% chance that I'm safe. That's pretty good, all right? Any actuary would say that those are pretty good numbers to live on 83%, right?
Or the day stationary?
Excellent question. So that's what the Magen Avraham wants to know. He says, why am I so worried? Ze mikre kavua. I have news for you. This is what I call kavua.
So basically,
What's kavua? Let's go back to our moral hazard. Why is he in the desert? Why is he lost in space? He did something. He went to that butcher shop and forgot. You're nodding your head.
I'm saying it's basically like we're just drawing a circle,
Yeah.
a kavua on anything that we.
Well, you have to do. Hold on a second. You have to do something. Meaning, you have to assign some kind of identification. Why this case? We go l'chumrah. You know why we don't say 83% chance? We say 50-50? Because you put yourself into the situation. Either you went somewhere where you shouldn't have, Saudi Arabia, or you did something that was not advised, and therefore you're lost. You're lost because of your, chances are you're lost. Chances are you're lost because you did something foolish. So we're going to penalize you and say, you're not 83% chance that you're safe. You're no greater than 50-50. And I think based on these two ways of looking at it, either through moral hazard or this concept about, we're biased when we do something subconsciously, you could play with numbers. And it's funny, it's not funny, it's interesting, he proves it with economics also. This isn't an economics year, but this is very true of the principles of economics and investing and money. And we do things that don't necessarily follow pure probability when we have our internal biases injected into whatever we're working on. Absolutely. Okay, so we have Haskama from the Rosh Yeshiva at the end. And on that note, I think we learned something. By the way, there's about 6 other cases. One of them has to do with the famous story in Brachos where Yehuda Garamoni, I don't know if you're holding in Mesechus Brachos, I think Daf Chaf Ches or so, where Yeah, I think it's Chavches. No, it's in Tfilas HaShachar, where Yehuda Ammoni, he wants to convert, but he's an Ammoni, and Rabbi Gamliel says, no way, you're an Ammoni, an Ammonite. The Torah says cannot become Jewish. So the one who argues with Rabbi Gamliel says, hold on a second, he may come from Ammon, but I don't know if you checked lately. Just because you're from Ammon, there's a guy by the name of Sancheirav who basically turned the world on its head, and everybody is all mixed up, where the whole world is one big mushkababel. And because you're from Ammon, who knows who you like Miha Yehudi, the topic today that everybody doesn't want to talk about, who is really Jewish? The Africans and the Bnei Dan and the Bnei Menashe and the Indians. Who knows who's Jewish today? We could be more than just 2%. We could be maybe 10%, according to a lot of scholars out there. So therefore, we rely on Rove and say what? Well, because Ammonites were diluted, chances are you're not an Ammoni, so you have nothing to worry about. So that's another topic discussed amongst this various, this topic that has very, very many tentacles and spread out, and each case, of course, is different. And that's what the article at the end basically said, that you can't really apply this moral hazard to all cases, but at least try to explain some cases. And if we explain some cases, it makes learning Nazir Yud Beis how we started. Remember how we started? About the difference between the free bird and the woman, why a bird hops from place to place, and we could rely on majority, but the woman who's caged, no disrespect to women, right? She's more stationary, as Rashi says, therefore, we're going to throw out this concept of majority and deem her no greater than 50-50. And on that note, it's 9 o'clock, and recording in progress. I shall see you next